How you going, guys? Dean from Blog for the Blood God here. Sorry for the delay, but I finally got the studio set up and I want to hit you guys with a video discussing the list that I took to the Victorian Team Championships, where I played an undefeated 5 games, where I tabled every single opponent that I came across. Being a team event, we didn't win overall because a couple of the other players on my team got some unfavourable matchups and some bad luck, but I wanted to discuss my list, what's in the list, how it functions, and how it kicked ass on the day. So without further ado, let's get into the list. Alrighty, so I've got the list laid out in front of me here. This is the minis that I took to the event. So I'm going to run through each unit in detail and why it's in the list and what it performs. But before I do that, I just want to do an overall summary of the army, so that then when I break into the details of each unit, you'll understand why they're there, because there's some interesting combos at play here. So there's 2 detachments. There's a Word Bearer's detachment, which has my Warlord in it. My Warlord is the Terminator Sorcerer here. And then there's a unit of 10 Cultists to fill out that detachment. So it's a really basic Word Bearer's detachment. Then we go into the Emperor's Children. So the Emperor's Children detachment has got a Demon Prince with wings and warp time. There's a Dark Apostle in there. There's a unit of 25 Cultists. There's a unit of 20 Noise Marines, all Sonic Blasters except for 2 which have Blast Masters, so maximum upgrades on that unit. And that unit also has a Icon of Excess. You will have heard me talking about this unit in my previous video from my Ratcon summary, but I've made some considerable improvements to the way that this unit functions on the table, which we'll go through later. That's then supported by a unit of 9 bikes with 3 melter guns in the unit and chainswords on everybody. And then we've got 2 units of Chaos Terminators, all with lightning claws. 2 in each unit have Reaper autocannons, and then 4 in each unit have combi melters, and then 4 have just combi bolters. And then, yeah, lightning claws on all. So that sort of summarizes the list. Now, the first thing that you'll notice that's different from this than my Ratcon list is there's no Keeper of Secrets, whereas in the Ratcon list I had 2, and there's no Demonettes. So they came out of the list, and I replaced them with the unit of bikes, the big unit of Cultists, and the Sorcerer and the Dark Apostle are now in a different format. So the Sorcerer is a Word Bearer's Sorcerer, and he's my Warlord. Now the reason that I've done this is because being a Word Bearer's Sorcerer, his Warlord trait gives him 1 free reroll that I can use anywhere in the army for standard CP reroll stuff, so saves, damage characteristics, that sort of stuff. So it effectively gives me 1 free CP, because almost every game you're going to want to reroll something. So you get 1 CP, and the detachment costs you 2, right? So you're already only at a -1 CP to take this. And it also allows you to get D3 CP at the start of the game. So very worst case scenario, you roll a 1 and you end up with the same amount of CP as you would have had if I made this a pure Emperor's Children battalion. I've got all the units, I've got multiple HQs, I've got multiple troops choices. I could have made it purely Emperor's Children, but it costs no CP difference to make him a Word Bearer. Now you might be asking, well, why the fuck would you want to make him a Word Bearer anyway? So the reason that is because the Word Bearers have a few really awesome relics and stratagems for sorcerers, or psychers in general. So one of them is the Malefic Tome, which is the free relic that I choose on him, and that gives him 1 additional psychic power and +1 to his casts. So with this I take Death Hex as an additional power that I don't normally have. He takes Prescience and Diabolical Agonies always, and the additional one I take is Death Hex. Now this gives me an edge, which is Death Hex is something that you don't often use. He can cast 2 powers, so he normally just casts his standard 2. However, if you go up against something like a Paladin unit, or like something with a really good invulnerable save, being able to Death Hex that unit and then hit it with a fuck ton of melter guns is a really good way of dealing with those really hard to kill threats that my army could traditionally maybe struggle with. So the Death Hex is a really good just tech piece that we could use. And we also wanted it in the list as a sort of a psychological ploy so that people would have to consider it when pairing into us, because they'd know they can't put their unkillable Lord of Change into me because they know I can just death hex it and take its invulnerable save away. So take that 3-up invuln off. You know, I can go, oh, you've got Mortarion with a 4-up invuln, that's cute. I'm going to turn off his invuln and then I'm going to hit him with a fuck ton of melter guns and just kill him, you know? So death hex is in the list for those niche matchups and to try to manipulate the way that our opponents think they can face our team. But the next thing, and this is the main reason that I really wanted a Word Bearer's character, is because they have a stratagem where basically once you cast a psychic power, if it fails, for 1 CP, you can make it an auto pass and it can't be denied. And that's really good when you've got things like Prescience and Death Hex, which are 7 and 8 respectively for warp charge value. So they're actually quite difficult powers to get off, and they're really clutch. They're really important. Like if you've dropped in all your Terminators near that big unkillable Lord of Change or near Mortarion or something like that, and your plan is to Death Hex him and then kill him, and you've dropped all that stuff in the movement phase, then you go into your psychic phase. If you fail Death Hex, you're fucked. You know, or if they deny Death Hex, you're fucked. Whereas being able to go in and go, cool, I'm going to cast this power, probably fail, and then just spend 1 CP to not only auto pass, but you now can't deny it, that's game-changing tech. So giving him that ability is huge. And also, on the turns when you want to go really spastically powerful with the Terminators or the Noise Marines, being able to put Prescience on him and just know that it's absolutely going to go off. Because if you cast it and you fail, instead of spending a CP to re-roll your psychic power and probably fail it again, you just go, nah, I'm just going to spend 1 CP to auto pass. Massive. There was some debate in our team on whether or not he should have warp time and maybe put Delightful Agonies on the Demon Prince instead. Because warp time is another one of those really clutch powers that you're like, oh, if you fail it and you've lined up this play where you're going to move your bikes and then you're going to warp time them and you're going to do all this damage. If you do that and then fail your warp time, it's like, oh, that's really bad. But I decided in the end that I thought it was more valuable for warp time to be on the Prince because he often moves up with the bombs so that he's providing the reroll 1's aura and he's also a beat stick in the middle of the table. Whereas, and warp time only having a 3-inch cast range means that whoever's casting warp time needs to expose themselves. Whereas the Sorcerer, he often is more of a support character. He sits back and casts powers from out of line of sight behind a ruin somewhere, and is largely ignored by my opponent because they're too busy dealing with all the threats that I'm throwing forward. So I didn't want to throw the Sorcerer forward himself and put him in harm's way, because if my opponent's able to snipe him, whether it be through weapons that can target characters or gets in combat or it clears the screening unit and then kills the Sorcerer, like if I lose that Sorcerer, it's a really big problem for me. So the idea was put warp time on the Demon Prince, throw him out. I often only need to use warp time once. Like I'll move the bikes up, I'll warp time them in, and then they've done their damage. My opponent's tied up, the Noise Marines move up behind, or it might be the other way around. I might go, you know what, I'm going to warp time the Noise Marines in, they get their massive turn of Daka, and they do huge damage. And at that point, you might need warp time one more time, whereas Prescience, I use it every single turn. Every single turn, I'm Presciencing something. Delightful Agonies, even though it's not as clutch as warp time, I still use it every single turn. Whereas warp time is something, it's sort of a 1 or 2 trick pony. So that was the logic there, and that's what the Sorcerer is all about. And that's the whole reason for that Word Bearer's Detachment, is literally for that stratagem. The other stuff was sort of, oh, fuck yeah, you can do this as well. Oh, sick, you can do this as well. But the main thing was, how can we insulate the list from its main weakness, which was, if you fail a psychic power, you're kind of fucked. Like, the damage on the Terminators, when they're against Imperium, they go from hitting on 2s with exploding 4s to hitting on 3s with exploding 5s. That's a massive change. That's it's way more than you might think. So in order to get the maximum damage out of units, I have to have Prescience, and therefore we needed the Word Bearer's character. And luckily, it doesn't cost you CP. It might even gain you CP, because if you roll a 3 And you're like, okay, cool, well, I spent 2 CP to get the detachment. I just got 3 back, so I've already profited 1 CP, and I'm likely to use my free reroll on like a melter gun where you roll 1 damage, and you're like, cool, fuck it, I'll just use my free reroll here, and I'll just, So, yeah, overall costs no additional CP, you probably gain CP, and you gain access to 6 stratagems and 6 warlord traits and 6 relics. It's just an amazing overall tech choice. So that was that's the Word Bearers detachment. I'll go through the list as if you hadn't watched my previous video from Ratcon. I do, however, recommend that you give that a look, because I actually still like that list. This list I feel is stronger, but the combination with the Slaneshi demons and the Emperor's Children, first of all, it's maybe a little bit fluffier in the way that it's pure Slanesh, and it also hits like a fucking freight train and does massive damage, and it's actually a really solid list in itself. And I went 4-1 at Ratcon with that, so that's pretty solid showing. But I feel that this list is stronger, but definitely go back and look at that one. And I will walk you through this one as if you hadn't seen that, so that you don't miss anything and that this is a sort of self-sufficient video. So the next detachment is the Emperor's Children detachment. Now this is where the meat of the list comes in. So the Word Bearers are just there to support and buff stuff. The Emperor's Children are there to get it done. So you've got a Demon Prince, he's got an Axe and Warp Time, his options. The reason we went with the Axe is because it gives you some Strength 8, which is a good break point against like Toughness 7 vehicles and Toughness 8 vehicles and Toughness 4 character like models. The Strength 8 is much better than Strength 7. And while you do get neg 1 to hit on your attacks, you sort of get +1 to wound against most targets, because if you were the Strength 7, against Marines you'd be winning on 3s, whereas with the Strength 8 you're winning on 2s. If you were Strength 7 against Toughness 7, you'd be winning on 4s, but now you're winning on 3s, you get the deal. So we decided that it was a sort of a lateral change from Strength 7 to Strength 8 with the neg 1 to hit and the +1 to wound. But we've sort of thought about it and we're like, yeah, but if you're going up against something like Marines, you might just use the Talon anyway, because you get more, because then you're not getting the -1 to hit, but you're still wounding on 3s and doing 2 damage. So this way you can sort of have your cake and eat it too. Whereas with the sword, it's like, if you have the sword, there's literally no reason you would ever use the Talon, because you just don't, there's no advantage to it. So we thought this way it sort of diversifies the Demon Prince's profile and allows him to attack different targets with different weapons to gain efficiencies in each case. So that was the sort of the conclusion that we reached there. And it also gives you, I think it's an extra point of AP, which is always good. So that's why we went with the Axe. And then Warp Time, as we discussed, is because he will often move up with the units, Warp Time one of them in, and then he's front and center. And he's really hard, I mean, not really hard to kill, but much harder than a Sorcerer. So he can go out and he can sort of take a punch. If my opponent's able to blast through the screen, chances are, once they've blasted through the screen, they don't have enough DACA left to blast through him as well. And if they're able to slip something through my lines and get a charge on him, chances are, by the time they've slipped through and they've navigated around all my minis, they're probably not likely to be able to hit him with enough punch to actually just kill him. And if they are getting in combat with him, like, he's a beat stick in his own right, so he's going to punch on pretty hard. And being able to have the Emperor's Children always fights first ability means that if they charge him and other stuff, I'm going to get essentially free interrupts, free counter-offense interrupts, which is really, really useful on something like Demon Prince, but not very useful on something like a Sorcerer. So that's why Warp Time's on him. He goes forward and does his thing. The next bit of tech is the Dark Apostle. Now, this is something that historically I've overlooked. I did used to run them back in the day with my Possessed, when you could make Alpha Legion Nurgle Possessed with all the buffs and you could get them to be neg 4 to hit. But ever since they sort of nerfed that and took that away, I was like, yeah, the Apostles, I mean, they're good, but like a Sorcerer is just better, and the Demon Prince is just better. So they're your 2 HQs. Don't need a third. Don't worry about it. However, Emperor's Children have a relic that is exclusive to the Dark Apostle, which initially I overlooked this stratagem because I just read, oh, exclusive to Dark Apostle, yeah, nah, never heard of you, don't want to look at it. But looking back on it, what it is it's basically a once per game, instead of chanting one of his prayers, you can activate this relic, and it creates a 6-inch aura of reroll all wound rolls for Emperor's Children units within that 6-inch aura, and it lasts till the end of the battle round. So this is fucking busted. This is so busted, because basically you can combo that with the Noise Marines, who put out 120 bullets per shooting phase, and when you're hitting on 2s because you're press against, and you're rerolling 1s because there's the imprints nearby, so you're now hitting on 2s with reroll 1s, and then you put the brutal frequencies, or whatever it's called, stratagem on them with +1 strength and damage, so they're now strength 5, 2 damage shots. Then you put Veterans of the Long War on them, so they're wounding anything toughness 8, or toughness 9 even, or less. They're wounding it on 4s. Because you're strength 5, so you'd be wounding on 5s, but then your vets, so you're now wounding on 4s. And then you're getting full rerolls. So you're wounding on a 4-up rerollable against knights, with hitting on 2s with a reroll, with 120 fucking shots. Like, holy shit. I'll get into some examples of that, just how fucked up that is, but that's insanely strong shooting. So basically that's what he's there for. He's primarily there for that, just that 1 turn per game where he goes in and he creates that aura and does the damage. I also give him the prayer for neg 1 to hit, and basically the idea there is that after he's done his turn 1 trick, I almost always do it turn 1 unless my opponent doesn't give me sufficient targets, in which case I might hold him off. But once he's done his trick and he's given the army the reroll wounds aura, he then sits back and he'll cast -1 to hit on nearby units. So he might make the big Cultist bomb, he might make that harder to hit, so that it can just sit and hold that back line and you're not just going to kill it with some stray shots. Or he might make the Noise Marines harder to hit when they go forward. There's lots of utility there. I don't really use that much though. Like in my opinion, he's 80 points and 1 CP to give my whole army reroll wounds for a turn, which I'd pay that every day. He's then supported by the Cultists, so 25 Cultists, and basically their goal in the list, the way they function is they protect your characters, because your characters will be sitting in that ball. They can string out along your backfield and stop your opponent from deep striking in behind you when you've pushed forward with your Terminators, bikes, and your Noise Marines. And they also can Tide of Traitors if you want, where you basically can pick the whole unit up, even if there's only 2 of them left, you can pick it up, recycle in a new unit, it can come on from a table edge, and then it can use the Honor the Prince stratagem, which essentially means they're going to guarantee get the charge from Tide of Traitors. So it can, I haven't used it yet in this way, but it can be used as a support to your Alpha Strike. So I could move the bikes up, warp time the bikes in, and then Tide of Traitors the Cultists, and get 2 massive charges after a bunch of Dakar turn 1. And your opponent can't do fucking shit to stop you. So that's one of the uses of the Cultists, but their primary use is sort of just backline, screen, protecting stuff, raising banners, that sort of thing. They're also pretty good at, because it's a big unit, it's really good for insulating the Noise Marines. So for example, one of the games I played my opponent had a burner bomber. And basically if he lands that bomber within 6 inches of a bunch of my stuff, he can spend a CP to blow it up and do 3 mortal wounds to every unit nearby. So I didn't want him to do that. So what I did is I bubbled up my Noise Marines with all the characters in the middle, and then I measured out 5 inches and created a ring of Cultists around it. So he actually couldn't place his base in there, which meant he would have to land on the outside of the Cultists. And then if he exploded, the explosion wouldn't hit my stuff. So being able to have a big unit of Cultists in the list gives you so much flexibility depending on your opponent and how you want to screen yourself. If they've got a unit of Vanguard vets that they're going to use Raven Guard and they're just going to throw it at you turn 1, you can go, cool, well I'm going to wrap myself in Cultists so fucking tight that you actually can't declare a charge against my Noise Marines because you can't end within an inch of them. So you can wrap around the unit and protect it. So you can protect it from turn 1 charges, you can protect it from bombs, you can protect your army from deep striking behind you. There's so many things that you can do whilst simultaneously raising banners, doing actions, scoring primary. The Cultists unit was an amazing choice in the list, which we ummed about for a while about what some alternatives could be, and I'm so glad I listened to my captain and put in the Cultists because they were fucking amazing. Next part is the Noise Marines. You know them, you love them. I personally think they are the most fucking insanely powerful unit in the game. I think they put out more damage, especially with the tech of the Dark Apostle and the support from the Sorcerer and the Demon Prince. They put out more damage than anything that is conceivable in a single unit. I had one game where they killed 9 orc trucks and also killed 2 mech guns and 2 of the war trikes in a single shooting phase. I had a game where they killed 3 Exalted Keeper of Secrets and an Exalted Lord of Change in a single shooting phase. I had another game where they killed like a unit of Hellions, a big unit of Hellions, like 3 or 4 Raiders, and then shot again and killed all of the stuff that fell out of the Raiders. Like, these guys are fucking bananas. Trust me, roll it out against any target and you'll find that there's nothing can survive their onslaught. The only thing that they do struggle with is 2-up armor. Things like Paladins or things where like transhuman or transhuman equivalent on like Deathwing Terminators and stuff, where it's like, okay, all of their pluses to wound don't really matter and they don't have any AP, so the 2-up armor is a problem. But that's why we've got Death X and Terminators with melt guns, so the list supports each other. But basically that unit of Noise Marines, every game that I won at VTC, I can attribute it to the Noise Marines. They fucking destroyed people. They can kill 2 knights in a single shooting phase, just go 2 knights dead, just 1 unit. And then the Terminators can drop down and go, cool. Between shooting and charging, they'll kill another one. Like, I can table a knight army in a single turn. So yeah, that's what the Noise Marines do. They're basically the big, scary ball of if it can see you, you're fucking dead. So the idea with them is they'll deploy pretty much anywhere on the table, because there's Emperor's Children have a redeploy stratagem. So my standard deployment method is to have them deploy in one corner and the bikes deploy in the other corner. And then depending on what my opponent does, if they try to hide from the bikes and they deploy over there, I can redeploy the bikes and go in. Or if they try to hide from the Noise Marines, I can redeploy the Noise Marines and go in. And if they stay central, well then I can probably just get them without having to do anything. So they sort of try and go like mid, like center left and center right, if that makes sense. So that they're close enough to the bubble of Cultists in the middle that has all the characters in it, so that the Demon Prince can move out, they can move up, warp time in, and then do their damage. Or the bikers can, like, there's lots of different ways that it will function on the tabletop. That brings me to the bikes. So the bikes are one of the tech choices which have been put in to sort of fill the role of the Keepers of Secrets, but in a different way. So one of the things that we were teching this list up to be able to beat, and reliably beat, was Dark Eldar. And one of the problems with the Dark Eldar and the Keepers of Secrets is if the Dark Eldar backline, the Keeper of Secrets aren't going to get that turn 1 charge, which means they move up and then they become prime targets. And Dark Eldar can go, oh cool, you're Slanesh, well we get reroll all hits and wounds for 1 CP, and they'll just kill both of those Keepers without batting an eye. No worries, right? And then you've just lost, 500 points out of your list. It hasn't achieved anything, and there was nothing really to show for it. Also, with the terrain that we were expecting was lots of ruins and stuff, so if people want to play tricky, they can just go, okay, I'm on the other side of the wall, I'm further than an inch away, you can't get me. And the Keepers just are too cumbersome, and they're not quite fast enough to get around stuff. So we were just a little worried that people were just going to screen them out with stuff, and it was going to be a bit of a problem. And plus the fact that I'd taken the Keepers to Ratcon, we thought, well, people are going to expect me to run the same list because I did so well with it. Why would you change it? So we were like, people are going to predict the Keepers, and they're going to plan for the Keepers, and they're going to practice against the Keepers, and none of that is what we want. So the thought was, well, what other things could do a similar thing, but not have the same weaknesses as the keepers? So we put in the bikes, and basically the bikes have the speed because they can move their 14 inches and then warp time to move another 14, so they move 28 inches. So even if you backline, they're going to probably charge you turn one. There's not much you can do to stop them if I decide I want to send them in like a missile. And then basically they get the utility from the Emperor's Children's stratagem, so they can shoot with all their bolters and their melter guns, and then they can shoot twice, which is really useful. And then they can also, with that charge, they can use the Honor the Prince to make it a pretty reliable 10-inch charge, because you can roll 2d6 and then just turn the lowest one into a 6. So it's essentially a 6 plus d6 charge, but it's actually even better than that, because it's like a 6 plus 2d6 pick the highest is probably the best way to look at it, because you roll 2 dice and whichever one's the highest you keep, and whichever one's the lowest you can turn into a 6. So it's an average of about 10 inches charge. So they go fucking 28 inches and then charge 10 inches. So you're going 38 inches down the table. There's not much that can really hide from that. And they can clear their own screens. They can move forward and they can just shoot what's in the way and then charge the ship behind it. Really hard to screen them out, really hard to stop them. Which gives them a huge edge over the Keeper of Secrets. They're obviously nowhere near as tough as the Keeper of Secrets, and they probably don't do quite as much damage because they don't have the flat 3 damage, and they also don't have the psychic utility. So there's a lot of pluses to the Keeper of Secrets, and by no means do I think the Keepers are done. I think they've still got plenty of play in the list, but this worked really well in this instance, so we were rolling with that. And the bikes also, because they have quite long bases, you can do a lot of movement shenanigans with them, which are, so one of the games, for example, I was up against an Orc player who had a bunch of Orc trucks and whatever. He won the roll to go first, so I basically spent CP to redeploy my bikes and my Noise Marines so that they were safe from where he had deployed. So that in his first turn he couldn't really do any damage to them. And then what I did is I moved out the bikes, warp timed them in, moved the Noise Marines up. The Noise Marines shot and just killed like a fuck ton of stuff. And then the bikes charged 2 trucks that had boys inside it that had gone up the flank of the table. And I basically pinned him against the wall of the edge of the table so that his trucks couldn't move to get out because I'd surrounded them with bikes. But he also couldn't disembark his boys out because the bike's bases are so big that he actually couldn't place his models outside. So basically I pinned those 2 trucks into the corner and then blown up everything on this side of the table. So that then in his turn he does fuck all. And then in my turn the bikes are able to fall back and then the Noise Marines shoot that off the table. So the bikes did a lot of utility, and all of this stuff you couldn't do with a couple of Keepers of Secrets. You just couldn't do it. So that's what the bikes are in the list for. And then the Terminators are obviously the powerhouse mop-up crew. And their deal is basically anything that's got high armor saves, they're here to solve. So the Noise Marines struggle with armor, the bikes struggle with armor, but the Terminators love that shit. So they go in with their lightning claws, they got the AP2, re-rolling all their wounds, so they don't need to be near the apostle, they can just go off and be their own independent unit. They're very self-reliant. They put in a ton of DACA, like even the 2 autocannons in the unit, they're really good for downrange. Like I'll drop the unit and I'll split their fire. I'm like, okay, well 2 autocannons into that thing, the 4 melter guns into this, and the 4 bolters into that, and I shoot, and then I reassess, and I shoot again, and I'll either go, okay, cool, the melter guns killed that shit, so now the melter guns are hit this. The bolters killed, didn't quite kill that, so they're going to go in again, and the autocannons are going to go into something different downrange. There's a sort of scouts over there, I'll fuck them up, that sort of thing. So it's a really self-reliant unit, and then it goes in with the same that Honor the Prince for that, essentially 6 plus 2d6 pick the highest charge, which also is worth noting that you can re-roll it. So what you can do is you can roll 2d6, and if you don't like the dice, like if you roll a 1 and a 2, or a 1 and a 3 or something like that, you might go, I'm going to spend a CP to re-roll that, and then roll like a 5 and a 3, and then go, cool, I'm going to turn that 3 into a 6 now, and now it's an 11-inch charge. So you can re-roll it and then change the dice. So it's almost, if you want to spend 2 CP, it's actually 6 plus 4d6 pick the highest, which is insane. So the Terminators drop in and they do that, and then obviously if they've got prescience on them, which I almost always do. Like I'll prescience the Noise Marines first, then I'll drop a Terminator unit, prescience it, then I'll drop another Terminator unit, prescience that one. And when they charge against the Imperium, they got 4 attacks each, which will hit on 2s because prescience, and then they'll any 4+, I can roll another attack. So often they go in with 4 attacks and they'll hit 6 times, which is insane. And then they wound with strength 4 +1 to wound if I put vets on them with full reroll wounds. So it's amazing amounts of damage that these guys put out. And the melter guns are just mainly there to dislodge things like dreadnoughts, things like Mortarion, anything that's got -1 damage, or anything that's just like multi-wounds with high armor value, so Terminators, Paladins, that sort of thing. They're there to sort of solve that problem. So that's more or less the list and how it functions. I'll give you a brief rundown of the games that we played on the weekend. So the first game was against an Orc player, and this is the one where basically he had like multiple trucks. It was just pure mech. So he had 2 battle wagons, one with guns, one with mega knobs inside. He had a bunch of scrapjet dudes. He had a bunch of trucks with boys inside of it. He had a bunch of mech guns. Pretty standard sort of mech orc list. He won the role to go first, so basically it was hammer and anvil deployment, so I just redeployed out of his range. So I'm like, you can't charge me turn 1, you can't shoot me turn 1, outside of shooting a couple of cultists, but I don't really care. So that's fine. So he just moved forward, and then in my turn I was like, okay, well, because you moved forward, you're now in my range. So in my turn, the Noise Marines moved out and blew up fucking everything, and the bikes moved up and did that pin against the wall, so he couldn't disembark his trucks. And then the next turn, the Noise Marines did. Then in his next turn, he nearly killed all the Noise Marines because I decided to put all the defensive buffs on the bikes because they were the ones who were all up in his face. And the Noise Marines had sort of done their damage. I knew they would have gone forward and blown up everything that they could see. They've done their trick. Now it's time for the bikes and the Terminators to do the rest. So I let him kill the Noise Marines. And also that's because the Noise Marines could just shoot when they died. So as he killed Noise Marines, I was able to kill more of his shit in his turn. So that was a huge blowout. Basically tabled him by turn 3. Everything that he had was gone, and we called it there. So that was the first game. Second game was against... It was Orcs, Dark Eldar, Orcs, Demons, and Orcs. Yeah, I played 3 Orc players, a Demon, and a Dark Eldar. So the second one was the Dark Eldar player, and basically he won the roll-off to go first as well. So I did the same thing. I just redeployed conservative. I was like, okay, you can't advance and charge turn 1. What's the maximum threat range on your Hellions? What's the maximum threat range on your boats? All of that sort of stuff. Redeployed everything pretty conservatively. He got some pot shots in and killed all my cultists and a couple of bikes, but nothing too dramatic. Terminators are a deep strike always. So but one of the critical mistakes he made was he moved his Hellions right up into the center of the table and moved his boats forward. Very similar mistake to the Orc player, where basically he moved himself all within my Noise Marines threat range. I think he wildly underestimated how much damage they were going to do, and wildly overestimated the survivability of his units. So I basically moved out, and the Noise Marines just targeted all the Hellions. I put enough damage in to just guarantee that I'd kill them. Like, I overkilled them by like 50%, but I was like, they have to fucking die. And then I deboated him with the combination of the bikes and the Noise Marines, and then shot again with the Noise Marines and killed almost everything that fell out of the boats. And from there, he was pretty much done. He did make it a very good game. It was it was close, I think, or closer than the other games, but by turn 5, I had tabled him and killed everything. I made a few critical mistakes in that game that in retrospect, should have cost me the game, because they were big mistakes. Like, one of them was I basically dropped both my Terminators in the same turn. It was basically because I got greedy, and he'd left me 2 really good spots to drop. Where I was like, if I drop there, I'm going to kill this, 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 and this. But if I drop there, I'm going to kill this, 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 and this. So I was like, fuck it, I've got 2 bombs. I was ahead so far in points that I was like, you know what, worst case scenario, this doesn't really work, but I'm still going to win. So, I'm going to win regardless. Might as well roll the dice and go for a really big win and drop the 2 Terminators. But basically what happened is, then because only one of them could double shoot, one of them did all the damage that it was supposed to, and the other one was quite underwhelming. They both made their charges in, but it wasn't quite enough. And then basically what happened is Drazar jumped out of the boat and just went and killed that whole unit of Terminators. When in reality, what I should have done is I should have dropped the one unit away from Drazar, killed all the stuff, and kept the other one to try and bait Drazar to come out into a more compromised position, and then tag team in with both units at once instead of splitting myself across the table. But yes, it's still a massive blowout. Still tabled in by turn. I tabled in by turn 5. Like on my 5th turn was when I killed Drazar. So very interesting game. The next game was against another Orc player. So this was against Aaron Green from Queensland, and it was, from my perspective, one of the most hilarious games of 40k I've played in some time. I can imagine from Aaron's it might not be quite as humorous, but basically what happened there was, it was Dawn of War deployment. He just deployed all of his boats, all of his, sorry, I should tell you what his list is. Fuck, I'm getting carried away. He had Orcs again. So this is the second Orc player. He had a bunch of trucks and then a fuck ton of mech guns. So maxed out on mech guns and then a bunch of trucks with some other bits and pieces here and there. And basically, because his army was so massive in physical space that it occupied, when he deployed it in the Dawn of War, which is quite a narrow deployment, or shallow, I should say, he was basically bunched up on himself. He was really densely packed deployment with a couple of characters dotted throughout, and then a whole bunch of mech guns with some trucks all on the front. So I deployed in my corners like I do. I'm on the roll off to go first. So I'm on corner and spend CP to redeploy my Noise Marines in the center, move them forward, move the DP, advance the Noise Marines up into the center of the table. And basically, through the combination of all the stratagems and stuff, I killed almost his entire army in that single shooting phase. But the reason that I was able to do so much damage is because when I shot with the Noise Marines, I divvied up their shots. I was like, okay, I'm going to put 3 into that truck, 3 into that truck, 3 into that truck, 2 into that mech gun, 2 into that mech gun, 2 into that mech gun, so on and so forth. And then started resolving the shots one at a time. And the first volley of shots to go through killed a truck, which exploded and did D3 mortals to all of the trucks and all the guns nearby. And when that explosion happened, he's just like, D3 wounds on this truck, rolls a 3. D3 wounds on this truck, rolls a 3. D3 wounds on my character, rolls a 3. D3 wounds on this mech gun, rolls a 3. Every single one of them was just 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. He ended up doing, I think it was about 17 or 18 mortal wounds to himself before I'd even finished resolving the shooting from my first unit. And then basically the rest of the shooting just blew up fucking everything. And then I'm like, cool, 2 CP to shoot again. And he was devastated. I think in that game I probably killed about 1,000 points, if not more, in just that first shooting phase. And then all he had was like a character back in that corner of there, a couple of mech guns here and there, some commandos that were off in deep strike reserves. So really not much. He had some storm boys in deep strike reserves, so he was pretty much tabled at that point. And then it was sort of just a mopping up game. It added insult to injury in the way that I didn't quite kill his shock attack bike guy. And then in his turn, he's charged into the Noise Marines, and I didn't overwatch, so he's charged in, killed 6 of them, and then they get to shoot on death, so they're shooting their bolt pistols. And when he's charged in, he's like, yep, cool, charging, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to use Vets at the Long War in the fight phase. And then my guys die, so they get to shoot in the fight phase, and because I used Vets, their bolt pistols are now winning that truck on fours. And I'm like, cool, 6 or 7 bolt pistols blew up the truck. And then in my fight, I was able to fight into some other shit and killed all that as well. It was like, holy shit, these things blew him up in his turn, and then he charges them with everything that he has, and they just killed that too. They just killed fucking everything. So yeah, that was an absolute domination. I think I had him fully tabled by turn 5, maybe 4. He played it really well. He was like, you know what, I can't win, but I'm going to try, and he tried as hard as he could to get every point that he possibly could. Things like he knew that in order for him to get deploy scramblers, which was one of his secondaries, he needed to kill my cultists because they were screening out my backfield and he couldn't get in there. So even though there's Noise Marines blowing him up and Terminators doing all this damage, he knew that in order for him to get points, he actually needs to kill the cultists, which was really smart. Most people go, you get them against the ropes and they just start swinging haymakers, whereas he was still throwing those strategic jabs, so hats off to him for that. He played a very good game. Unfortunately, it did still end in a 20-0 maximum possible win, just because of the nature of that first turn explosion that just ruined his whole lines. So, so that was third game. Fourth game was against the Demons player, and this was the guy with the... he had 3 Exalted Keepers of Secrets. He had the Exalted Lord of Change. He had Shalaxi Hexbane. He had Nurglings, and then a fuck ton of Beasts. And basically, we got... Vanguard Strike style deployment, like the table diagonals. And he deployed all his beasts and stuff along the line. And I deployed all my stuff out of his charge range. And then I won the roll off to go first, so I've just gone, cool, same thing. I'm going to spend 3 CP this time. I'm going to redeploy the bikes. I'm going to redeploy the Exalted Champion. I'm going to redeploy the Noise Marines. And then in my first turn, I'm going to move the bikes over here, the Noise Marines up, the Exalted Champion here. The Demon Prince is going to go into the middle to provide those auras. I'm going to put prescience and everything on the Noise Marines. And then the bikes shot, and because of the reroll wounds, they killed one of the keepers on their own, just through the bolters and the melter guns. And then the Noise Marines killed 2 more keepers, and the Exalted Lord of Change, and a unit of 5 or 6 Beasts of Nurgle. So basically I'd killed everything on this side of the table. All he had left was up the back corner, was Shalaxi Hexbane and another unit of Beasts, which I had made it so that my Noise Marines were out of charge range of. So in his turn, he literally couldn't do any damage to me, so he just moved up. And then in my turn, I went, oh, cool, now all of the Noise Marines and the bikes and a unit of Terminators all hit that and take it. So he effectively got a single movement phase and nothing else. Which is like, it's a feels bad moment in a way, because he was a really great guy, and he was not a new player. And his list was savage. Like, he wasn't new and he wasn't bad, but he was relatively new to the Melbourne tournament scene. So it sort of felt bad to show just how savage the Melbourne tournament scene can be, just in regard to damage dealt. Like, it was still a really good game, and basically because we finished it early, me and him never met him before, we just fucked off and had some lunch and talked shit, and yeah, it was great, but it just feels bad to have somebody only get to do a movement phase in their whole game. They get to do one movement phase. So it's a bit of a feels bad moment. But it was fun because like the game literally lasted maybe 15 to 20 minutes. And then I'm like walking around seeing how my mates are going and whatever. And like I'd be standing next to one of my mates. He's like, "What are you doing? Aren't you playing a game?" And I'm like, "No, what? Why haven't you tabled your opponent yet? Like, what are you waiting for?" You know, so it's just it provoked some fun banter. But yeah, so that was that game. And then the final game was against Tristan Bone, who was another Orc player. So basically, we'd established now that my list just fucking destroys Orc mech. So against Tristan's team, I was put up. Actually, no, Tristan was put up and they put me into it, I think. And Tristan was like, "Yeah, I've got this. I think I can win this." And I'm like, "Do you though?" He's like, "Yeah, I can win." And then we rolled to see who goes first, and I won the roll to go first. And I was like, "Do you still think you can win?" And he's like, "Yeah, I've got this." And then just the same thing. Turn 1, I went in and just killed fucking everything. His list was similar to Aaron's, but less on the mech guns and more on the vehicles. So he had a bunch more vehicles and a bunch more of the shock jump dragsters and that sort of shit. And he also was the one with the burner bomber. So he was the one where I've deployed with the bubble and then the ring around it, so his burner bomber couldn't land in there anywhere, and I was protected from that. And then yeah, because I won the roll to go first anyway, that didn't come into effect. But basically, yeah, that was another game where the game was finished relatively fast. Tristan, again, he made me play it out. He didn't concede. He was like, "No, we're playing all the way to turn 5. He wants to see if he can get any points." It actually got to a point in that game because I had taken the kill more secondary, where I have to kill more units than him. But basically, I'd killed him so much, he was actually trying to suicide on me. He was trying to throw units into me so that I would have to kill him and try to table him faster so that in turns 4 and 5, there'd be no units left, and I wouldn't be able to get kill more. So I was actually running away from him so that I wouldn't table him. I was actually actively trying to stop myself from tabling someone. That's how much power is in this list. But yes, now that we've gone over why each unit's in the list, how they function, what they do, and some examples of them in game, the last thing I guess worth touching on is the secondaries. So the main secondaries that I took in almost every game was banners is really good, unless it's 4 or 5 objective markers, but if it's any of the ones with 6 objectives, I'll generally take banners, raise the banners. Engage on all fronts was also pretty good because the noise marines can warp time into 1 quarter and the bikes can move into 1 quarter. So from turn 1, you're getting 3 points. And then basically, if they kill your bikes, you drop Terminators in their turn 2. If they kill your noise marines, you drop Terminators in their turn 2. So you're generally going to have something in all 4 quarters most of the game. So engage on all fronts is good. Raising the banners is good. Kill more is good. Because it's essentially like a Terminator, 2 Terminator bombs, a bike bomb, and a noise marine bomb. So it's really only 4 units that are out there doing the damage. And generally those units are going to kill 2 or 3 units each. So kill more is good, engage on all fronts is good, and raise the banners is good. However, they're not always good, and sometimes the mission secondary is better, and sometimes there's ones against your opponents. So like each orc player I went against, I took the bring it down. So I was like, cool, kill vehicles, that's easy. So I went like bring it down, grind them down for kill more, and like raise banners, or engage, or something like that. Was the general sort of combos that I would do. Against like for example, the Demon's Army, I took Assassinate because I was like, cool, well you've got 5 characters and I have to kill them all, so might as well. The philosophy there was that have a core that you always take, unless something is better. So always take engage on all fronts, deploy banners, raise the banners, and kill more. They're my 3 standards. And then basically, if I feel like I'm not going to kill more, like if I'm up against like Dark Angels, Terminators, or something like that, I might swap kill more out for something more relevant. Might be a mission secondary. It might be Assassinate. There's a few matchups where that final secondary can be quite challenging, and that is one of probably the few weaknesses of the list. But yeah, that's the general philosophy behind my secondary options. And I guess the only other thing really to discuss is what matchups it's good into and what matchups it's bad into. It's going to be much easier to just explain the ones it's bad into because that's a much shorter list. It's really fucking good into almost everything. Its one weakness that I would say is either things like Grey Knights, Paladins, and those sorts of things can be sort of hard to move. The Terminators do pretty good work there. The main one, I guess, is MSU, lots and lots of small units on a really dense table where there's lots of hiding places. That can be a problem because they can put themselves in a place where the Terminators are screened out, so I can't drop in and get their meat. And if they're out of line of sight, then the noise marines can't just kill them. Whereas if the table's like a medium or a light table, I'm able to sort of just move the noise marines up into the middle and just kill everything, and then the Terminators are free to drop wherever they want. Whereas if it's a really dense table and my opponent has lots of disposable little small units, they can sort of fill the gaps and make it quite hard for me. So yeah, disposable MSU on a dense table is a problem, and so is barrage. Like if my opponent has like 3 Wyverns or Medusas or whatever the fuck they're called, the guard artillery, or anything like a bunch of whirlwinds or anything to that effect. If they're able to hide them, so I can't shoot them, but they can shoot me, that can be a problem. Particularly for like the noise marines, because they're still only 1 wound each in the toughness 4, like they die very fucking easily. So if my opponent goes first and they just go, cool, turn 1, I'll just kill all 20 of your noise marines, now all of a sudden my unit goes from being able to table anything to struggling to kill some stuff. So the noise marines can be quite vulnerable in those matchups. in those matchups, I might actually deploy a unit of Terminators and reserve the Noise Marines instead, just because a unit of Terminators in cover is not likely to be killed by barrage, whereas the Noise Marines are. So I'm yet to have that matchup, but that's one of the ones I'm a little bit more worried about. And the other one is just really fast, aggressive combat can be a problem. Like if they're able to go, cool, we're slinging forward all this, all these units, getting all up in your face early, because the Noise Marines, when they shoot, when they die, but if they die in combat, they can only shoot their pistols, which is kind of bad. And the Terminators, they're only 2 wounds with a 5 up in vulnerable state. So a couple of Lightning Claw, other Terminators, or Vanguard vets with Lightning Claws or anything like that, they'll go through and they'll shred a fuck ton of Terminators, A couple of Thunder Hammers just go boop, 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 kill all your Terminators. So things like Space Wolves and White Scars and Blood Angels, those sorts of things, they can be a problem for the list. However, I have teched the list specifically into combating Imperium by giving a icon of excess to every unit. So I get those exploding 5s, with prescience it becomes exploding 4s. I actually do massive damage to them as well. And because I have army-wide, with the exception of the Word Bearers, army-wide always fights first. If they try to multi-charge me, I get those interrupts, which is really good. So if they try to go, and that's part of why I've pivoted into bombs, like the big units, because if I have a big unit, sometimes in order for them to kill it, they're going to need to put 2 or 3 of their units into it. But because I always fight first, if say they go, okay, we're going to put our Succubus and our Incubi into your Terminators to kill them, I go, cool, they fight first with the Succubus, kill 4 or 5 Terminators, that's fine, because those 4 or 5 Terminators on the left are going to kill those Incubi. And now they're going to survive. Same goes with the Noise Marines, same goes with the Bikes. Even the Cultists to an extent, like I had Orc Boys charge into the Cultists, but also something else charge into the Noise Marines, and they're like, cool, character's going to fight the Noise Marines first, kill a bunch of them, and I'm like, yeah, cool, now I'm going to interrupt with the Cultists, and actually killed like 3 of his Orc Boys. So now he's only hitting me with like 2 Orc Boys instead of 5, and he actually didn't kill anywhere near as many Cultists as he was expecting. So into combat, it's probably not that bad, but that is one of the areas where a sufficiently skilled player with a list that has the right tools via combat can become quite problematic for this list. And the other one is Infiltrators. Just fucking Infiltrators are a problem because they can just screen me out and the Terminators can't do anything, and it's challenging. That being said, Bikers are a pretty good answer to that because they go in with a fuck ton of attacks with chainswords, so they do kill Marines pretty easily, and Meltguns don't hurt either. So if they try to screen out the front with the Infiltrators, I can just kill them. So if I'm going up against Infiltrators, the trick there for my opponent would be to keep the Infiltrators at the back and push your army aggressively forward, have the front of your army able to take the punch, and then the middle of your army able to deliver a counter punch. And that way I can't drop in behind you, I can't surround you, I can't outflank you, but if I hit your front, I'm going to get hit back. So yeah, that's probably one of the ways I'd try to pilot to get around this list if I was teching, if this became a regular in the meta and I had to verse it myself, because at the moment I'm the only person I know, online or otherwise, that's running anything even remotely similar to this. I know the Terminators are a tech choice that's very popular. The Emperor's Children Terminators are in quite a few different lists, but the Noise Marines, don't see them anywhere. The Bikes, I don't see them anywhere. The Word Bearers Detachment, specifically for its purposes, don't see that anywhere. Never see that relic taken, never even heard of it before this event. So there's lots of things about this list that I think are truly unique and truly original. I shouldn't take all the credit. I did have help with my captain and my team. We sort of worked on this list together. We took my original design with the Keepers of Secrets and we molded it into this new list. But yeah, I definitely haven't seen anything like this online. But if this video was to, not go viral, but if this video was to gain some traction, which you're going to help by smashing that like and subscribe button, if this list was to become more popular and people were to start seeing my results with it and start trying to emulate it and copy bits and pieces and even just get inspiration from this list, it would then be worth looking into how do you actually beat it. And some of the ways to beat it would be those combat tricks, barrage, Grey Knights being able to use their astral aim to just delete shit, like that's really powerful. So there's lots of ways that this list can fall down. And I'll be interested to see if there's anyone in the local tournament scene. I'm actually going up to a Queensland event, Gladiator Games Teams event, in Queensland in a couple of weeks, provided COVID doesn't fuck us. So yeah, that'll be interesting. We'll see how that goes. And I look forward to giving you guys some feedback. There's a few changes that I'm going to make to the list, which might as well go through those changes now. They're very, very minor. So in this list, the Terminator is in Terminator armor. The Sorcerer is in Terminator armor, sorry. Of course the Terminator is in Terminator armor. So the reason we did that is because we were worried that he was going to get attacked and killed. And also the word bearers have a stratagem where basically you can auto pass a save. So you can roll a d6. If you fail your save, you can just be like, nah, that's a pass. It essentially turns a saving roll into a 6. So we thought that's really good on the Terminator Sorcerer, because if he does get caught out of position and your opponent does get attacks on him, it gives him that little bit extra protection. He's got a better save, he's got an invulnerable save, got an extra wound, and he also has access to a stratagem that can help keep him alive as well. So we thought all of those things for 15 points, it's not bad to just make him that little bit tougher. However, my games on the weekend sort of determined that if he's being attacked on any level, I'm already losing in a big way. Because he basically sits at the back of my army protected by everything, and everything's so aggressive up in my opponent's face. If they're attacking him, chances are I've already lost. So the thought was, instead of creating a situation where he's safe from damage, what can I do to push my damage higher so that I'm winning and therefore he's not being attacked? So how can I create different situations? So we ended up going with one of two options. One of them was to add a few more cultists to the cultist unit, which means that I can use it more aggressively by slingshotting it up with Tidal Traders and doing serious damage over there. Or the other one, which is the one we ended up with, was adding 3 more melter guns to the army, 2 in one unit of Terminators and 1 in the other. So now instead of having 4 melter guns in each, one of them has 6 and the other one has 5. And this way, when they drop down the unit with 6 melter guns that shoots twice, is now hitting you with 12 melter guns. If I've got pressings on it, it's 12 melter guns that are hitting on 2s. It's amazing amounts of damage. And the theory is there, if I'm dropping that much damage, how am I losing? You know, if I'm doing that much damage to them, what have they got left that can even threaten the Sorcerer? You know, he's so far back and protected by all my army. They aren't going to have the tools to go all the way over there and kill him. They'll be too busy killing my stuff. So that was the theory there, is basically, instead of bumping up the defense on a unit that's never going to be targeted, it's probably better to bump up the aggression on units that are going to be in the fray, doing the damage, doing the work. So that's the only change that we've made. And I'm very happy with the list, and I'm looking forward to the Gladiator Teams event, and I'm looking forward to hitting you guys with some feedback from that, and hopefully I can bring back another 5 tablings, and we'll see how we go. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm planning on doing another video on team events, where I'm going to discuss the strategies and the techniques that we use when pairing. So with the team events, you get your 4 players, and basically the captains sit down and you basically go through a pairings exercise, which determines who from my team versus your team. And we have some really, really cool tricks and really, really cool strategies on how to compose your team, what sort of lists you want, and then how to use them in the pairings process. Who should be put up, who should be paired in, who should be your champion, those sorts of things. So I'm going to do a full tactics video, a full strategy video on pairings for a 4-man team event, which is going to be great. And then I'll also do another one, which is going to be just a sort of a general review of the tournament and the way it was run and some of the challenges and some of the great things and the bad things and all that sort of stuff. So keep an eye out on this YouTube channel. and I'll be posting up some more stuff throughout the week. And also make sure you head over to my Facebook page and give us a like there. I get a lot of interaction with people on there, less so much in the comments on the YouTube. I do read every comment on YouTube, but it can be a little bit more clunky, whereas on Facebook page, it's a little bit more fluid, a little bit more interactive. So yeah, jump over on the Facebook and you can hit me a message and we'll have a chat. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from you guys. And until next time, have a fucking shit hot day. Ta-das.